Musical Talk at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe 2015. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, and if I had £1 for every time I've ever introduced a programme in that way, I'd have £1, because I'm assuming you keep giving me the same pound coin every time. Well, we've come to the end of our series of programmes looking at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. I think by now you know how much I love it, and I hope that you in turn also love it, or at least appreciate what it offers, whether you've been there or whether you've just experienced it vicariously through these programmes. But today we're going to be looking at two musicals that were new up in Edinburgh, and they are, for me, the pick of the Fringe. So we are talking the creme de la creme, if you like, the two shows which I thought were the best. Now, I have to clarify that for Musical Talk, we like to give the pick of the Fringe to new writing. So I should say there were several other shows up in Edinburgh which were fantastic, but weren't new, and therefore I wouldn't be in a position to give the pick of the Fringe award to them. And a good example of that would be Usher's The Musical. It's been in London, in fact it's come back to London, but when it was in Edinburgh it was almost perfect. The venue was just right, the atmosphere was just right, and the cast were absolutely pitch perfect. It was brilliant. But I can't make Usher's The Musical my pick of the Fringe. Similarly, a number of shows that we've discussed in the last few weeks here on Musical Talk got 5 stars from me, and were therefore pretty much as good as they could be. But at the end of the day, we do have to rank, and I have picked two shows to be the pick of the Fringe this year. One I'm awarding a silver medal to, and one I'm going to award the gold medal to. And I was trying to see if there was anything that linked them. Well, in a way there is, but it's something that's almost so obvious that you might think, well, why is he bothering to pick it out? But the thing I think links the two shows we've picked in this episode is their British sensibility. Now, that's a very odd thing to talk about, because, as I say, it's almost self-evident. But actually, there is a British cultural tone, which is quite distinct from any other cultural tone, notably in the world of musical theatre, the American cultural tone. And it's not at all surprising that much of the new writing that comes to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe every year is British in tone and cultural outlook, because it is British in origin. But sometimes things touch on British themes, or look at things with such a British set of eyes that you can't imagine it being done by anyone else. And I think the two shows today are good exemplars of that. But let's not talk about the shows in their context. I think the most important thing today is to celebrate the two shows themselves. Well, what are they going to be? Well, let's start with the first one. This is the Musical Talk Pick of the Fringe Silver Medalist 2015, and it's called Wonderland. Needless to say, I gave it 5 stars. I called it subtle, exuberant, intelligent by turns, a complete treat. But I'm not the only one. It also got other stars from other places and a great deal of praise. For example, Fifth Dimension said, Wonderland is a beautiful mix of great performances, lovely writing, and fantastic music. Go and see it. It's wonderful. And so it was. Now, of course, with a title like Wonderland, you obviously realise that we're in something to do with Alice in Wonderland and the world of Lewis Carroll. And you'd be absolutely right. So, let's hear more about this wonderful piece, Wonderland, and we can do that by listening to the interview I conducted with Ollie Wood and Andy Bewley. And a lovely couple of chaps they were too, with some genuine insights into their wonderful Wonderland. Musical Talk.
Our show is Wonderland, a new musical at Greenside Nicholson Square at 11:30. And my name is Andy Bewley. I am the director and the writer of the book.
And my name's Oliver Wood, and I've composed the music and pretend to act sometimes.
You undersell yourself. Now, this is a fantastic show.
Thank you.
I, like a lot of people, went in not quite knowing what to expect. It is called Wonderland. You naturally expect a Lewis Carroll kind of sensibility. It clearly is based or reimagined Lewis Carroll kind of storylines, but it's so much more than that. Would you care to tell me, how would you describe Wonderland to anyone who was walking by, desperate to see a show?
The way we've described it is wicked pre-called Wizard of Oz. And it was wonderful and very clever, and that's what I really enjoyed about that show. And so when we looked at the Through the Looking Glass series, we thought it'd be really interesting to try and make sense of all these characters and how they got there. So essentially our show is a prequel to the books. But as you've said, there are little bits of strands from the actual stories which we do drop in. But what we've tried to do is take the nonsensicality of Through the Looking Glass and try and give it a heart, I think. That's the crux of it.
You've done something tremendously clever there, because you do weave all the strands into a wonderful story, and there's this external frameworking story, isn't there, as well? Or at least it's not framework, it's a parallel story, which is the Alice story. It's almost as though you've written Wonderland in Alice, rather than Alice in Wonderland, in a strange way. So how did it come to be? You know, when did this first sort of hove into view?
Well, I started thinking about writing a musical as part of my degree course.
And where are you?
I was at University of York. I've just graduated. This was part of my third year. So I started out with grand ideas of a 2-hour musical, Alice in Wonderland, spectacular, and then very quickly realised that was completely impractical, given that I left myself about a month to write the show.
Really good.
So that kind of went on the back boiler, and for my course I just submitted bare bones of a score. And then Andy came to me and suggested that we apply for an opportunity to take the show to the Fringe, which we did and were successful. And the rest of that's kind of been a product of that timescale and that 1 hour slot that we've had to fill.
So when was your bare bones finished? When can we say the first sort of iteration?
April.
Oh, this year.
It was
Jolly
April
good. That is
this
tight,
year.
isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a wonderful moment when, basically, I heard all the music, and the very first song I heard was the song called Little Bird. And there was no real story about it. The only story that I could really get anything from the song was the fact that Bella and Hazel, who eventually are the Red and White Queen, didn't get on. And I thought that was a very interesting sort of tension to build the story around. And so we set out with the intention of creating a story which basically Alice was an accessory character as opposed to the central. And what eventually came to be was that, as you say, we had these two parallel stories running next to each other. And then the really tricky aspect, dealing with all the parameters of a Fringe slot, was trying to fit them all into a 56.5-minute slot.
I wonder if you could be more precise.
I think it was 27 today, actually. But the story basically came from the fact that we wanted to do something different with the Alice in Wonderland stories, and then what came to be, through the creation of all the backstories of the Mad Hatter and the White Rabbit and the Caterpillar and the Cheshire Cat, was just we sort of started aligning them to sort of that classic that storyline, like who's the baddie and who are the ones that get on, and why did the Mad Hatter go mad was the question that popped into my head, and that was the start of a really, really exciting creation of that particular plot line.
So it is a collaborative effort in terms of the book.
Very much so. I mean, Andy's headed up actually writing the script. I kind of came with my bare bones score. I submitted a very loose plot line, which kind of was kind of starting point for the stuff that we've kind of ended up with now. But Andy's
a prequel to the prequel.
A prequel to the prequel to the prequel.
It was very, very obvious when I heard Ollie's music that I'd be a fool to try and ask him to rewrite things, because the music he had at the time was really, really quite beautiful. And so I just sort of used that as a starting point as well. As he's written this song called Little Bird, and it's about Bella and Hazel, who are eventually the Red and White Queen, and they're fighting about something. And there was also Wonderland, which was Alice singing about Wonderland in a fairly retrospective and as if she'd written it herself. So you sort of take those two and you place them along in a storyline, and you sort of fill in the gaps.
So you're building nexus points, aren't you?
Yeah.
Very much so.
And it was a very, very, very tricky process, because with the books there is so much you can do, and it's very, very hard to cut certain characters, and it's very, very hard to try and make the characters new whilst also having a bit of Carol in them. But, I think we've done okay.
I think you've done tremendously. Let's talk about the score then. Forgive me, because how would you describe it? I'd like to know your, give me. It doesn't have to be one word, but.
Eclectic, I think, certainly. But then I think that's a product of writing a score for a show based on Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it's going to be eclectic. But then at the same time, we've kind of, I think. There's a kind of through-running style. I'm definitely inspired by the likes of Sondheim, Stephen Schwartz. I mean, I think there are moments of Sondheim very much, particularly in the lyric writing. But
there's a couple of Sondheim nuances that can be drawn if you're looking to do so. But I don't think you should undersell yourself. I think it sounds very distinct. If you were asking me, I would say it's a modern take on a very, and I use the word advisedly here, an English tone. That kind of sort of piano, clarinet, and flute sound is actually a very distinct sound.
Yeah.
I know that's not exclusively what we're getting. There's violins as well, and saxophone, and goodness
No,
knows
but there
what,
is a kind of pastoral.
There is. That's exactly what it is. Yes, absolutely, and that fits perfectly with the subject matter. I mean, it is a beautiful score, beautifully written. And forgive me. If you write like that, you're going to go a long way. If you don't mind me saying.
Thank you very much.
Listen to the bald man. I'm speaking sense. But also there's this perfect fusion between the tone of the music, so it seems to me, and the tone of the piece, because it is rooted very much in a British literary tradition and a British fantasy tradition, actually.
Yeah.
It is difficult to find that balance to make that work. So the marriage, the symbiosis between the two, of your book and your score, is remarkable.
Thank you very much.
If you don't mind me saying, the dynamic that pushes the whole thing along as well.
There is a. I didn't really pinpoint it as we were going along writing it, but it's quite true actually. I was watching a lot of documentaries on Lewis Carroll and the books. It's his 150th anniversary, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
And
so you're watching the ones on BBC 4 rather than the ones on Channel 4? Because the ones on BBC 4 are all about literature and the ones on Channel 4 are all about photography.
Yes,
I won't take that any further.
I watched both of them, actually, very interesting.
Yes.
But the people, the celebrities who are fans of Lewis Carroll, they were all from sort of Blackadder and all from, there was a lot of Monty Python people there, and you could sort of see why they loved it. There was a sort of comparison between what they've done in their careers and what you find in the Carroll books, and it was really interesting. It was very, very British. I sort of got the sense from the music that there was a sense of regality to it. There was a sense of
nice.
Almost as if you could imagine it all being played in a court with just a chamber orchestra. And there's also very
Star Chamber Orchestra.
Yeah, exactly.
Will.
There's also these very, very lovely but very odd moments of quite poppy music, I think. Very, very popular. We used to take the mick out of ourselves and say Adele could sing one of these and get away with it. And I'm not saying we're writing for Adele, but there's a song in it which feels like Adele should be singing it.
But she sings in a tremendously British tradition as well.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
That is very true.
But I'd be lying if I said that it's all been planned. I mean, I think what we did was we sat out and said, look, there's going to be bumps along the way. Let's always sort of trust each other. And we had another fantastic team around us who constantly gave us great support. And there's a lot of people in our team who are very blunt and very, you're being pretentious, you're being silly, you're being too precious.
Grounded, I believe, is the
Grounded,
word. Yes,
and we are anything but grounded, Holly and I.
I think what's interesting regarding the kind of the way the score and the book marry, I've kind of just thought about this, but actually there's quite a lot of comedy in Andy's script, and then the drama is taken over by the characters playing the script, and it's almost reversed in the music in that you have these very dramatic vocal lines, and then there's a lot of comedy in the instrumental parts behind it. So that's an interesting way of thinking.
I mean, it's
about
very
it.
hard not to be. The characters are funny. Like,
they are.
There's a Richard Oakman who plays our caterpillar. I think we spent about 30 hours in a room together trying to figure out how to be a caterpillar. Because the very obvious thing to do is lie down, which you can't do as a clarinetist.
But he has a kind of timid lugubriosity.
He's
Timid lugubrious.
He's brilliant.
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
My favourite scene. I'm glad it's my favourite scene. Is the tea party.
Well, yes, it's a tour de farce.
Yeah, it's a tour de farce. It is.
Or a coup d'etat.
That was meant to be in the script.
Yes.
But it is great fun, and it's also just wonderful seeing your mates who are sort of paying so much money to be at university, get on these 2 foot by 2 foot blocks and pretend to be a March Hare and a Dormouse, and it's been a really great experience just by seeing how well these musicians, I mean the majority of the musicians in the show have just adapted to being really quite tricky characters. Like it's quite hard to.
Yes, they are actor musicians, if you want the terminology.
Yeah, absolutely.
A Cheshire Cat with a saxophone, you're not going to see that anywhere else, are you?
No, but it was also in terms of characterization, it was marrying the characters we were given from the books and marrying the very natural performative talent that the musicians had. So Ben Turner, who plays sax, does loads of jazz stuff at uni, and he's a very natural performer. So it's not so much about throwing a Cheshire Cat at him and seeing if it sticks. It's about saying, "What's your Cheshire Cat, Ben?"
Well, he's quite a cool cat anyway, isn't he? I mean,
he's very cool.
Very
cool
cat.
Yeah. And then with the caterpillar and with the white rabbit and their particular instrumentation, it's just about finding the nuances of how you marry the picking up of an instrument with how a caterpillar would pick up an instrument. Those really bizarre abstract rehearsals were the most enjoyable, actually.
Yes.
And I'm incredibly proud of them all. They're so talented and they're very, very easy to direct.
I'd actually like to take you back a step or two to something you said earlier about the fact that you two have, these are your words, your heads in the cloud, while some of your colleagues are much more grounded. But that's in the story. There's the dichotomy of the story. You have the very... And when I say dull, I don't mean in terms of a narrative, but there is Alice in her bookshop,
Yes.
the real life, and she's not having a happy time.
Yeah.
And that is the grounded situation because it's speech marks real.
Yeah.
And then you've got the head in the clouds aspect of Wonderland. So the dichotomy of your working relationships is also built into your... Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. I think the bookshop was a tricky scene just because when you're doing a musical on something so juicy as
Yes.
Alice in Wonderland, you sort of think, why are we spending 10 minutes in a bookshop? But actually, it was a really, really... I mean, I sort of fought for it because it was a really, really important part of the story because you need to have something that Alice runs away from. And the lighting for that bit is literally almost lights up. I mean, it's so sterile and...
it's the flatness of her life.
Yeah,
writ large, isn't it?
Yeah. And Tom and Vicky do an amazing job with that scene because they've also been great because I think I rewrote it about 14 times.
Gosh.
They were just so willing to sort of go along with that, and it's actually some people's favourite scenes, bizarrely. Very very weirdly, they sort of think I want more of that, and it's like, well, no, you can't. We're doing Wonderland.
And yet, you do need the contrast with Wonderland to work because actually Wonderland alone is a fairly rich meal. You get gout.
Yeah.
Actually,
Musical theatre gout.
It's only recently been diagnosed. So it is actually that little sort of grit in the oyster that gives you the pearl. Not wishing to be too old-fashioned in my phraseology, cliche, but that is, I like that. The fluffy marshmallow with an edge, which is Wonderland, and the flat, but with a hint of possible imagination in the real world.
Yeah.
Because nothing's quite as it seems either. I don't want to give anything away, but it's a beautiful. It unravels itself very, very beautifully. It is a bit of a Fabergé egg, actually, in all of its aspects. Well, you can walk around a Fabergé egg and it's beautiful, but you open a Fabergé egg and it's beautiful, and then you open it further and it's still beautiful.
I'm not entirely sure what a Fabergé egg is, I'll be honest.
It's a jewelled egg
seen
created
one?
for the Tsars of Russia. Sorry.
Yes, by a gentleman called Fabergé, and they opened so beautifully, and they had these wonderfully intricate little gold trimmings inside, and they're just stunning things.
Or it's a very nicely wrapped cream egg
Wonderful.
with a beautiful
cream
sensor.
eggs I know very well.
But you do get the swirl of the yellow and the white in the cream egg.
Exactly.
I'm doing my best here.
Can we say, a cream egg's a metaphor for the show, really.
Yeah. Now, let us talk about audience response. We met, you and I, Andy, on the Mile before the show. In fact, you persuaded me to come and see it, and I'm so glad. No, I'm so glad you did. This is a cracking show, and I will carry on saying that, and I'll carry on telling other people too. We're back to eggs again. We're cracking up.
Yeah.
But
Humpty Dumpty.
you made the observation that you had written it as a family show, but you were finding adults were getting a lot out of it. Now, I can tell you that I was in an audience where there were children, and I could hear them afterwards saying that they had really enjoyed it, and some of them were about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely clear to me that the parents, guardians, and older people, me, were truly enjoying it because it is sophisticated, complicated, clever, layered, textured, whatever you want, as well as overtly what you're getting if you're 6. I think you said you hadn't quite expected that response.
I hadn't. We'd set out to write a kids show that parents could bear. That's the way I thought about it. And
that's how to make money.
And I don't know why we set out to do that, because what we had in terms of the music and what I wanted to do with it was sort of the opposite of it. And I've never really quite acknowledged the fact that what we've been writing is a very almost naughty British show. There's lots of humour in there, which
suddenly it's all coming to mind. Yes,
yeah,
it is.
there's lots of humour in there which British people get, I think, and it's sort of.
It's culturally British.
It's very.
Absolutely,
I don't like. I hate comparing myself to someone who's like brilliant, but like I love Richard Curtis, and I think there's stuff like that which there's sort of. It's all self-deprecating in its sort of its layout. But yeah, to get back to the point, sorry, we hadn't intended to be a show that parents would specifically enjoy. What has happened in terms of audience feedback, and it's amazing, is that the family really, really enjoy it, but more often than not, the kids are the ones who are just sort of like, I didn't quite get this, and the parents are like, how did you not get that? You know, and so it's really lovely seeing the parents almost become quite kid-like watching it, which is sort of probably my proudest achievement from the thing is seeing parents walk into the show and think, oh god, here we go, Wonderland musical. And then by the end of it, they're sort of leaning forward and have got as big a smiles on as the kids do, and that's a really, really lovely thing, which I'm chuffed about. And
well, before we were recording, you said something very interesting about having picked up a quotation from someone a few years ago about actually that ability for parents or adults to regain their childhood unexpectedly. Yes,
and I think that was always on my mind, even if I didn't really acknowledge it. There's a sort of I don't know what I was getting at. I think in combination with the music and the script, we were trying to basically disarm adults in the audience. We were trying to sort of like subtly bring them into it. So during the prologue, there's little bits and bobs which are quite sort of almost swear words, and you hold them back because you want the adults to almost have that jump of fear.
Here comes the
thinking,
edge.
What have I done? I brought my child to a show where they're going to learn all the naughty words, and then you don't.
Lenny Bruce does, Lewis Carroll.
Yeah, and so you sort of
cover
trick
your
them.
ears.
I mean, I'm overthinking it now.
Also, I should like to say, anyone listening, it is not that at all. You know,
no, it's not at all.
It's absolutely family friendly. Yeah. You've got nothing to worry about, but there is just a little bit of grit that makes it interestingly crunchy.
Yeah, exactly. And
like a good sandwich.
Yeah, a good sandwich with a cream egg in it. Yeah, so I think we just wanted to endeavour to make a family musical, and in doing that, what we did was actually we created these characters which the kids love. The kids really, really love, and they adore the characters because they're so silly. Yes. But then actually everything else we did was fairly adult, not even friendly, but specific.
Yeah.
Yes, the music is quite complex, and the script, there are jokes in there which are it's full of wordplay and
crikey, yes, some of your fabulous confabulations where 2 or 3 words are forced into each other until their marriage.
Yes.
My favourite one, I think, was eccentricity, or eccentric and electricity.
Eccentric eagles charging them full of electric centricity.
That was the one.
Yeah, I mean, that was great fun. I mean, I adore words, and my fear was that Ollie wrote such beautiful pieces of musical theatre with none of that in, and I thought, will he let me? I'm going to come in with all these like actuality of the facty wacty. It's great. It was great fun. It's great fun just sort of like destroying the English dictionary. But
oh no, I don't think you're destroying it. I think you're recollaging it. If you don't mind me saying it. But I actually think that flight of imagination works brilliantly with the flights of music. If you don't mind me saying, the music is beautiful, and it fires off like a firework in the sense of it's glittering, it's colourful, and it goes rather like your makeup, if I may say. You're still in makeup, I should say that. But it fires off like all these beautiful glittery lights in all these directions, so it's soaring and wondrous in itself. I've been trying to avoid using the wonder, but it is, and therefore the words actually really complement that because they are as free as air with it, so it's all going on up there. There's a kind of sort of, I feel I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. There is a kind of kaleidoscopic feel to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But actually, every time you look at it, or every second later, it's slightly different. The colour is different, the feel is different, the reflections are different. It's remarkable, that is, the score and the lyric working together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. I mean, I wrote the score and the lyrics, and that's maybe a brave move for someone. I mean, I wrote pop songs for a number of years, and that definitely comes across in some of the score writing. But I think that was an interesting dynamic, kind of working with a book writer and then being solely responsible for the lyrics. And I know, I mean, the Tea Party was a particularly tricky scene for me to write because it has this kind of very central point in the story, and everything kind of gravitates towards that point. And if it wasn't good, and I'm not sure whether it is or not, but I think that would have been a massive flaw in the show. So that was a really kind of difficult thing for me to write, and I guess difficult for us as a team to incorporate a script which led straight into that song and made it a very natural process.
I mean, essentially, when I realised how good he was at writing music, I became very, very unprecious about my script. For our first draft, the Tea Party scene was about 14 pages long.
Gosh.
And it was essentially 4 different starts leading up to a song. And they sort of all intertwined together. And it was just full of like wordplay mesh from my brain. And I just thought, whenever the song comes, and it will come, at some point it will come. I'm sorry, mate.
You have to do the distillation.
Yeah, I will put it in there, and I will find a way to fit the script around the music. I'm not saying that to be like, oh, woe me. It's just it was a really good process. You write as much as you can, and it's all on a certain theme and topic, and then you just sort of select the bits which work. And I'm not sure if that's how you write a musical theatre book. I'm not sure if that's the way to write a play. But it worked for me, just sort of like getting it all down and then waiting for that, because it has to gravitate towards the music. And
it's only wrong if it doesn't work.
Exactly. It's only wrong if people don't like it.
Yeah, but that's true, it is.
We had another wonderful moment in rehearsals where me and my girlfriend were in France for a wedding. So we kind of left these guys to get on with it, and we had this chess game at the end, which is this phenomenally complex piece, really.
Half the stage, let alone anything else.
Indeed, and Andy had come up with this wonderful way that it all fit together, and he sent me a video, and he said, we need a piece of music, we need underscoring for the whole thing. And I was thinking, oh god, because obviously the rest of the music it's been the other way around. I'd given him the music, and he'd worked his butt off to create everything else around it. And the chess game, we wrote down all the cues, and I wrote this piece of music, which was kind of a culmination of all the themes you'd heard throughout the show.
Yeah.
And then we sent it back as a recording, so it was exactly as the video was. And Andy rehearsed it with this recording, and there's this wonderful moment they sent us back another recording where he just said, oh my god, this is working. This is actually working.
It was. I mean, I was quite angry at Ollie at this point in my life. And so when I sent off this request and it came back, I thought, he's going to have done music which is, inflexible, and I'm going to have to like shape it around the music again. Like, I hate that guy. I never want to work with him again, and all that stuff. And then we played.
Sorry, this has turned into Jeremy Kyle.
We played it. We played the Sibelius file, and we staged the scene. And it was like Ollie was in the room. It was like the music just fit absolutely perfectly, and it was a remarkable sort of administrative job. Not necessarily sort of musically. It was like administratively, he put it all together.
I think creatively metric.
Creatively metric. It was a real mathematical achievement, and it was an amazing moment, because I just didn't think that. I thought that was too ambitious. I thought it was too ambitious for just a group of students to achieve.
Ooh.
And
you're saying dangerous words here.
No,
I think your ambition is fine because you've met it.
Well, yeah. Well, it's just there's a certain watershed I think you have to hit as a student theatre company when you realise that this is not your job, and everyone has to pay their bills, and
life goes on.
Life goes on, absolutely, and everyone else has other things going around it, and it's very, very
weddings,
difficult
France.
Weddings, France. I love how this is covered to the story. And there were moments when I thought, are we pushing it too far? And I actually think what's been really great is that we aimed for something brilliant, and we tried our hardest to do that. And if it wasn't brilliant, then it would be good, at the very least. And I think that's what.
Well, it's full of care and craft, but it's also full of intelligence and subtlety, and I don't ask for a great deal more. I was picked up almost immediately. I went in, and the moment it started, I thought, I'm in for something good here. I could, sometimes you can just see. Mm-hmm. I just saw, and I thought, right. Was this
the overture, or the untracked?
Yes. Yes. What was that second word?
I don't know what it's called. I can't pronounce it.
Untracked.
Isn't that the beginning of Act 2?
That's indeed.
Yeah. Well, don't ask me. I'm not musical theatre.
I think you might be now.
No, we have to shout out to Rebecca Adams, who's my girlfriend, and she did all the costume design.
Oh, beautiful!
And she's done a fantastic job. I think half the audience who come to see this show have probably been impressed with the costumes on the Mile, and thought that was great. So she's done a fantastic.
She's very
job.
unwilling to admit that she's very, very brilliant. The costumes are as good as West End shows. I sometimes think.
It's beautiful,
absolutely incredible.
And everything's delineated as well. It doesn't blur. Everything's distinct, and yet it creates a whole. And that is a real secret. Holistic.
Plus, I think our costume meeting was about 25 minutes long. And so, I was in a massive rush because I was doing another show at the time. And she took whatever blurb I gave her.
Cards, feathers.
And ignored it all. No, she really... The designing of it was just amazing. I remember when I walked into her living room and they were all hung up. And I saw the playing card costumes. And I was just blown away. And I suddenly it's a very odd moment when you sort of spend a lot of time with someone, but you don't quite realise how much they're capable of. And it was just like this very shy, timid girl had suddenly just created something extraordinary. I didn't know what to do. I was just sort of like flailing. I was like, I don't know if to hug you or bow down.
Or try them on.
But try them on, yeah, just put them all on.
So, I've got to ask, obviously audience response has been tremendous, and quite rightly too. What next for Wonderland? Beyond Edinburgh, is there a next for Wonderland?
Well, we've applied for a wonderful grant from O2. O2 did this wonderful scheme called Think Big, which is a way of getting young people into a career, essentially. We applied for that, and they've essentially given us some money to take the show and develop it over a year-long period.
Really?
So that's one option we have. We've also applied for the NSDF Edinburgh Award and for the festival there. Who knows how that will go, but that would be a wonderful opportunity.
I think the difficulty of touring this show now is that there's been such a heavy load of Alice in Wonderland shows, and there are some crackers in London still, like the one that Les Enfants Terribles are doing. I've not seen it, but everyone who has seen it has just said it's astonishing. But I think this is what I'm sort of going to stubbornly pursue, is that I think perhaps our greatest achievement as a show, without wanting to be too arrogant, is that I think we're one of the first musicals, Alice in Wonderland musicals, which isn't complete tripe.
Yes, that's true.
And because we listened to them all, and we thought, oh my God, no one's been able to do it like Frank Wildhorn. I love Jekyll and Hyde, but it was, bless him, it was not very good.
And the Disney score is not one of the better scores either, even.
No.
I must say that the best musicals I've seen related to Alice in Wonderland, and I include yours in this subset, are the ones which take an askance look at it. I saw a fantastic thing which, in my head, was written by Giles Brandreth, but I don't know if that's true.
No, it's true,
here in
yeah.
Edinburgh a few years ago, with a score by somebody called Sue, and I've forgotten her surname, I'm very sorry, but it was a beautiful piece. It was about Lewis Carroll in later life hiring a woman to be his Alice.
Right.
And it was actually touching and moving and beautiful score-wise, and that was fantastic. But it's not really Alice in Wonderland, it's the wider canon, if you like.
Yeah.
I think that was what was so difficult for us is seeing all of these previous attempts. And Frank Wildhorn's score's got some moments of absolute beauty and wonderful music, but taking a story that has absolutely no plot to all intents and purposes, and rather than just putting a show on with a series of vignettes on stage which don't really give you any as an audience member, trying to create a series of characters and a score that was accessible, interesting, complex, and encapsulated that kind of Wonderland incredulity.
Wonder.
In terms of where the show's going, I think we'd be fools to not see how big it can get, and as
if it's good, they will come.
Yeah, and as hopefully, and as we sort of said right at the start, we aimed for something brilliant, and I think we've landed on something potentially quite good, and I think from my perspective, I'm just going to aim as big as we can get, and I think we all know what that means, and see if we can do it, because I'm very, very, very confident in Ollie.
Yeah, so am I.
And given time and space, and not in France, I think he could expand it to something really quite, really, really, really quite beautiful. And I'm very, very. I think we're both very, very keen to have people rip it apart and say this is what wouldn't work, this is what wouldn't work, this is what wouldn't work. But I don't think we ever want to step away from what we have right now, which is, like you say, it's Alice in Wonderland themed, but we've created our own sort of neo.
Yes, you have.
And so that's why, why not? There's no reason why two students can't produce a
top-notch show.
A what musical before the age of 25. Why not? You've seen Smash.
Here's my question: do you have a website, or is there a way of contacting you?
We do. It's incredibly inventive. It's called Wonderland: A New Musical. .com. We've got Twitter, which I used to run, and then it got taken off me because it became a little bit naughty.
Okay.
So Wonderland ANM is our Twitter. We're on Facebook as well under Wonderland A New Musical. We're on the Mile from 1:30 till 4:30. We're performing at 3:30 today as well. And apart from that, I mean, it's so easy to track people down nowadays. Just like,
oh, it is, yeah.
Come see us. We're wearing lots of card costumes.
Yeah,
but not in your personal life. So, how long are you here in Edinburgh for?
We're here until the 22nd, and then I'm heading off to a wonderful little place in Scotland called Loch Islet, where I'm going to have a rest.
Very good.
You can track him down there as well.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I can tell you have a 5-star show. It's a blue chip show, and it is a fantastic show. And I want it to go somewhere beyond the Edinburgh Fringe this year because I think it really, really deserves to. Like the caterpillar, it has many legs.
Thank you ever so much.
But it is a brilliant show, so thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much for your time.
Liz. Thank you.
Musical talk. Well, there we have it. Ollie Wood and Andy Bewley talking about Wonderland. And you can go to their website. It's wonderlandanewmusical, all one word, .com. Well worth having a look. And I really do hope that show goes on somewhere else. Musically, it was very British, possibly even actually English in some senses, but certainly British in its wider context. And of course it was a prequel, and an extremely well thought out, considered prequel to one of the great works of British literature. I can't recommend it highly enough, and so if you ever get the chance to see it, please do. That's Wonderland. And one of the things that came out in that play was that unspoken sadness that many of the characters were able to portray. And I think that, if anything, is one of the identifying factors of a British cultural piece. So much about discourse in this country is about not saying what you think or feel, or finding ways of talking round it. It is the unspoken, whether it be feeling or thought, which drives who we are, and is one of the keystones, I think, of British cultural identity. It was there in Wonderland, and it was there in the next piece we're going to be talking about. And this, of course, is therefore the Musical Talk Pick of the Fringe 2015. It goes without saying it was a 5-star show. I called it a perfect new British musical, and once again I wasn't alone in saying so. What's the name of this piece? Well, it does sound unnecessarily provocative in some senses. It's called Get Your Shit Together, and it means it in the sense of get your act together, pull yourself together, man. And that is as good a description of what's going on in the plot as anything I could tell you. It is essentially about a young man whose life has gone to pieces. Suddenly he finds himself without his relationship and without his job, living in a very unpleasant sort of set of digs, and his family, principally his 2 sisters, sort of step in to try and help him. But because he's not addressing his issues, and there's so much unspoken business that he has with the problems in his life, and so much unspoken business between the siblings together as a 3, that actually the problem isn't faced head on, and therefore develops in a musical comedy kind of way. There's an element of farce in this piece, all the way through to its very satisfactory and poignant conclusion. And that element of not saying what you think or feel is written all the way through this marvellous new piece. Just taking 2 examples, one of the sisters had a kind of sparky, bantering, flirtatious relationship with a barman. You can see that they're interested in each other, but they're too afraid to say so, can't afford to be vulnerable, and so they replace what they might actually be feeling with sharp 1930s screwball comedy back and forth banter, if you like. It's beautiful to watch and very, very real. So many of us don't actually say what we think and feel. How many people in Britain tease and insult their best friends because you can, because that's the best way of letting them know that you have affection for them. And another example is in the burgeoning relationship between our hero and the person who delivers the pizza. I won't say too much more than that, except to say it's absolutely delightful. It's all about displacement, really. The ordering of the pizza is done in substitute for what might be recognised as more traditional courting. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Get Your Shit Together. I was lucky enough to talk to Elliot Salt, who plays the person who delivers the pizza, but rather more importantly, was involved in the creation of the piece. She's one of the writers. So let's hear from Elliot now as we discuss Get Your Shit Together, the musical talk pick of the Fringe 2015. Musical talk.
My name is Elliot Salt, and the show is called Get Your Shit Together. And I am the co-writer of the book, the lyricist, and one of the cast members.
Now, Get Your Shit Together, I'm going to say, has got what might be seen as a slightly provocative title, just because of the S word, although you can swear on musical talk, but actually is a very, I think, real, touching, in many ways, story, really about familial relationships first, and romantic relationships second, although it is a failed romantic relationship which triggers the whole thing off.
Yeah.
So would you care to briefly describe what the show is, without revealing the ending in any way?
Obviously, yeah. Well, it's essentially a show about a guy called Alex whose girlfriend leaves him for a breakfast TV presenter called Breakfast Dave.
And who hasn't had that experience?
And I mean, we've all been there.
Yes.
And he loses his job due to an incident related to that, and has to move into a horrible apartment behind a pub where a band called Ernest and the Keen Beans are rehearsing for their gig incessantly, and his sisters come and try and cheer him up and help him move on, which doesn't go down quite as well as they'd hoped.
Yes, because they are very different personalities, the sisters, as well, aren't they? And there's a certain antagonism, as you would expect between siblings, between the three of them, but also between each of the combinations of the two of them. So, yes, no, it explores that family side very well, and actually that's something you don't see that much in musical theatre, at least. So, let's start at the very beginning. How did Get Your Shit Together get together? How did it start?
Well, our company, Deadpan Theatre, started a couple of years ago, when I met my co-writer Missy doing another play where we were bored in a tech rehearsal and started writing a first scene as a joke for this other play, Low Tide in Glass Bay, that was on last year, which we starred in, and that was again about family relationships, so it's something that we write about quite a lot.
Thematic.
Yeah, and so that ended up going to Edinburgh, and we did another play this year called Changing Partners, which was on at Brighton Fringe. And then we went to see a play in Edinburgh last year, which was on at Big Belly, and loved the space, and we're both big musical fans, so we were like, it'd be great to do a musical in here. It's sort of the right size, it's not too many seats, and it's, for those of you who haven't been, it's sort of a...
vaulted chamber, would you say?
Yes, I think that's probably the best way to describe it. Yeah, a cave, which is...
It's either a vaulted chamber or a chamber as vault. It's
yeah, I feel like it's that rare combination of both, and the sort of damp dripping, and in our sound check the microphone went off too loud by accident and a bit of the ceiling fell down.
Very much like the curious incident of the dog in the night.
So we went to see that, and that's sort of where the idea of the horrible apartment and the dodgy pub came from, and the play sort of came out of the set. And interesting you should say about the family relationships is that we knew we wanted to write another play involving that. And we kind of like writing rom-com sort of thing, so it all came out of that, really.
Now, I think we should talk about your sort of pedigree in this, because, well, 2 years ago you were one of the stars of a pick of the Fringe for musical talk called Take It Interns.
I was indeed, yeah.
By Ronan Shields and many others, and what an excellent show that was. And it really was an excellent show.
It was so much fun to do.
And it was so much fun to watch. I mean, it was a cracking show. And of course, you were part of the cast of that, and as a group, you were all with the University at Bristol, studying music and drama and things like that, I think. So there's clearly something in the water in Bristol. But here we are 2 years later. Can I ask what it is you're reading or have been reading at university? And, you know, there's a world of difference between the theory of learning theatre, shall we say, and then doing it.
Yeah, well, I read English. I've just graduated. So not explicitly linked, but actually very useful,
good
obviously, in terms of book writing and sort of interpretation and writer's intent, I suppose, which is very deep for a light-hearted late-night musical, but who knows, it may have helped. So yeah, that's what I've been reading.
Yeah, and you have found that useful in a practical sense? Well, clearly you have, because it's a very successful show, but...
I'd say I found studying English oddly more useful in acting than writing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think it makes me read into lines slightly more than... I mean, I would anyway, but it's good to have that kind of practice at very quick interpretation. So it means that sort of on sight reading or first rehearsal, it's
You've
I
already
think
got a thumbnail sketch.
Yeah,
of who
I think
you are,
I think it probably helps to know that. But obviously, with this one, I'd hope I kind of had a vague idea of the writer's intention in the first rehearsal, given that I'd written it.
And I'm guessing just from the way you're talking that the book obviously came first because you'd had this idea of what you wanted.
Yeah, the book was first.
But you knew you wanted it to be a musical. So how did you track down a composer?
Well, we had heard of Gavin, I suppose.
Gavin
Dale, who has just graduated from music at Bristol.
From Bristol, yes.
Yep, obviously. Yeah, and he had been the assistant musical director for production of Cabaret that I was in last year,
okay.
and had written his own musical this year called 1983, which had the most beautiful score and had scored another big show that was on at Bristol this year. So he was kind of doing a lot of stuff.
Right, yes, fine.
It's very,
a man to go to, I'd have thought.
Yeah,
yes.
An incredibly clever, talented man. And we sort of, on the off chance, messaged him on Facebook, I think, saying, would you like to help? And he was like, yes, absolutely, sign me up, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, that is the most fantastic news ever. And I'm so glad he said yes, because it's just made the show completely. He's genius.
Well, actually, you say made the show. I think it's actually all the parts working together in beautiful balance.
Oh, that is nice.
And one of the things that I delight in, and we're going back to the familial aspects of the story, actually, I think, which I think is really the heart of it, but also the wider relationships which develop, which is that although it's a comedy, and at one level it's... the opening conceit is both silly and serious, if that makes sense, because Alex is in a bad place because he's been dumped, but there's been an incident at work, which is actually just horseplay gone wrong, but it involves a stapler and a broken leg and things like that, and that almost sets the tone of being silly, although it also can be read completely as this is the kind of thing that someone who's having a breakdown would sort of do and misjudge. It's all about misjudgment, I think. But what I adore is the fact that actually it's a very truthful play. It's a comedy, it's a musical, but if you stripped out the music, you still have a very truthful play. Those relationships ring absolutely true to me, the familial ones, but also the relationship ones. The sardonic sister, for want of a better phrase, has a beautifully sparky, flirty, but it's an unusual flirty relationship with Sam the barman, I think. And they're both witty people, or rather they describe themselves, one is witty and one is amusing. But it's almost a 1930s screwball comedy relationship where they're clearly fascinated and interested genuinely interested in each other, but are also playing that hard-to-get thing through witty one-liners. So that's a wonderful relationship. You've also got the relationship that Alex has with the character you play, which is beautiful and gentle and stumbling and embarrassed, and I think there's the word I would have to use for this is British. So, and those relationships ring true. And of course, there's the younger sister who's not in a romantic relationship.
No.
She's got a Betty friend who's the very camp leader of Ernest and what did you call them?
Ernest and the Keen Beans.
The Keen Beans, which is the group, as you say, next door. Which, by the way, I love that conceit of them. You know, you have a band next door who are rehearsing, but therefore are part of the action, and yet at the same time also able to deliver the musical. The music for the show.
And we're very lucky to have such a multi-talented band who can act brilliantly and
yes.
play music and sing.
Well, I think we'll get onto them in a minute. But those relationships, stupid question, but it's a question nonetheless, they ring true. How have you made that feel so genuine? Because I think those relationships, it is the strength of the relationships and the interplay between those relationships that gives us an absolutely rock-solid book foundation from which all the fantastic orchids are growing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, well, obviously, largely down to the acting.
And you're underselling yourself, but I will accept the acting is fantastic.
I know, I'll show off about my writing in a minute. I just feel like token congratulations to the cast for making it work. No, they genuinely are brilliant. And the direction, actually, there was a lot of work in rehearsals. A lot of the first stuff we did, because the writing was actually done... was still being done during the first rehearsals, so that we could develop alongside the way that people's relationships
almost
came up.
workshopping, but slightly more advanced on it.
And I think the first thing that our directors, Jude and Max, focused on was a bit of improvisation about where those relationships fell and what the line was there, which is great. And I would say that relationships for me are the most interesting things to write, which is interesting that comes off.
The core of drama as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I think what's fun about it, as you say, is that it does do the romantic thing and the sibling thing, And all of the relationships are very different. But I think once you've got the character ideas, and I think with the siblings, it's actually a very simple idea of kind of super optimistic, friendly person, and then the sort of dry, sarcastic one, which are kind of stock characters when you start off, and then you obviously give them a little bit more depth as you go. And then you throw in the sort of bemused middleman, and that is kind of a relationship that's very easy to explore, and is good fun, especially for a musical, I think, because musically, if you've got very contrasting characters as well, it makes for a good range of songs and sounds and stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yes. You can tailor your score to match the different emotional moods and the different relationships and the different personalities, absolutely. Yes, because the younger sister, who is the absolutely sort of squeakiest kind of upbeat, to the point of being annoying kind of younger sister. I don't mean that the performance is annoying, but, if you had a sister like that, if one had a sister like that, I can imagine it would get tiresome.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the hardest part, because although it's the most stereotypically musical theatre one, it is the most easy to get wrong, I would say. And I think Hannah does a great job of not being...
And she does...
annoying.
Brittle hurt when brittle hurt is required as well. So it's not one note. I mean, everyone has a journey, and that is why it's a good book. I've said many times before that incident without meaning is soap opera.
Yeah.
This isn't incident without meaning. What's lovely is that as things happen throughout, you see the characters change, respond, react, and learn, or learn from the failure to learn the first time sometimes.
Yeah.
And that is, people talk about journey arcs of character and journeys and things like that, and these are all just words for the same kind of thing, but actually everyone in the story, certainly the central characters, develops and learns something and is a better person at the end, I think. And certainly a happier person at the end.
Yeah, I'd say
knowledge brings happiness.
Aside from Ernest in the band, I would say all the band, who just sort of seem to live in a world of their own entirely.
Well, they're a Greek chorus in an odd way, aren't they?
Yeah,
yes, they are, quite, yes. But as you say, they live in a bubble.
Yeah.
And it's true. Not every character can always develop. The band are fantastic and integral, but they aren't what it's about.
Yeah,
so
I think also, they kind of need to stay the same in order for everything to...
the central point around which everything's changed.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the character of Alex.
Okay.
Who's the central character? I don't know who your actor is.
Tom Glenister.
Right, he's fantastic. I mean, they all are, but he's got a very difficult job, because in the course of this, we meet him when he's at his damaged low, but he's not acknowledging it. So he's sort of in denial. Or rather, he intellectually knows it, but he certainly doesn't emotionally allow himself to show it. And for him, he's in this sort of bad place, physically, which is metaphorical, of course, as well as where he is emotionally. And then suddenly his sisters, who are there with the best of intent, turn up, and it's the last thing he wants. But he's trying to put on this sort of facade that everything's all right, and then he actually acts upon that facade to take it a step further in order to really show he's all right, in order to drive them away. And then he has to come to terms. I'm not going to explain how that happens, because I think that's such an important and fantastic and funny and touching part of the story. But he does have to acknowledge that he is not right. So he falls into the bottom of the trough that he's been sort of walking the edge of, I think, and come out of it. That's quite an emotional journey. And it's quite a sophisticated piece of writing, and therefore a sophisticated piece of acting, I think. Because in lesser hands, he would be despondent, despairing, depressed.
Yeah.
And what he is those things hidden, which is a much more real and I think a much cleverer way of writing it. I love that. I love that writing. I love his performance. How did you find him? How easy was it for him to pitch it? I'm just interested how that character developed and the symbiosis between actor, writer and director. Yeah,
I would say unusually for the kind of romantic lead, I suppose. It ended up being the most complicated one to write, I think, because as you say, nobody really wants a whiny mess, which is kind of what the show is saying. But it was kind of like getting that across and being able to see where the sisters are coming from in their concern, and from the older sister's point of view of kind of, get your shit together, basically. So he that sentiment needs to ring true without being irritating for the audience. And
well, he's not morose.
Exactly, which I think was an important decision made quite early on. Of he needs to be sad without being overly self-pitying, or at least if he's going to be self-pitying, it needs to be funny. Which is the great thing about comedy, is you can that's the kind of thing that you can do, which is so much fun. So yeah, we worked on it a lot in rehearsals of trying to find the tone that would sustain in that way, and also to begin in a place that he could go from. And I think I remember at one point sort of trying to describe it as a graph. He kind of starts outwardly here, miming for a podcast, in a kind of mid-range, which then dips, and then he gets back up at the end, and it's all like that. So I think we tracked it like that, which was very helpful for everybody, I think. So.
And he found it.
I think it was
Did he find the characters sufficiently delineated from the writing or the workshops that he was able to, because it's a subtle performance.
Yeah.
In the middle of a musical theatre show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, you can hear what I'm saying in my voice. That's unusual. I mean, I'll say it more overtly.
Yeah.
A depressed hero in a musical theatre show at the beginning would normally be boo-hoo.
Yeah.
But he isn't boo-hoo. He's in fact, what he is, he's depressed in a drama sense. A dramatic, as in, if one makes the difference between drama and musical theatre, in drama you explore the subtleties, in musical theatre you explore the emotions. I know that's absolute nonsense, but I'm using shorthand for what the focus is on. I know that's stupid, but there we are. And it felt like a dramatic representation of that kind of thing, which understood the social context. I'm going to use the word again of being British, actually. That kind of thing where you put the shell on because the society demands the shell.
Yeah.
And we are, how are you? You could be dying inside, but you don't sing a song. You say, I'm fine.
Yeah.
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 I love that. I just thought it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And he also brings a rather splendid sort of everyman sense to it, which I suppose helps everyone respond to him.
Which is nice, yeah.
But he's he does both the everyman, and yet at the same time is quite. I suppose he's oddly charismatic. But I don't know how I would describe it, because it's not conventional charisma. He's very. He's a man who's easy to like.
Yeah.
Even though he does.
Which is interesting, because that was the very consistent piece of direction, which is a very bizarre piece of direction to get. It was a necessary one, but
it is, absolutely.
I suppose for Tom it's kind of like, make sure people like you, and that is a very pressurising concept in a lot of ways, but he really pulled it off, I think.
Yes, he really does.
Yeah.
That's in no way to underplay the rest of the pieces. Let's talk about the sardonic sister.
Okay.
Her name is?
Lana, played by Sylvie Briggs.
Now, I love her character.
Yeah.
She feels like she's walked in from this 1930s screwball comedy in a way, strangely.
Which is very interesting, because that's a big thing. I enjoy watching that kind of thing. So
splendid. Well, in which case she's sort of Myrna Lloyd to William Powell, if that makes sense. And in fact, actually, it is that kind of sort of thin man sensibility in a strange way that she has with her, I'm going to call him love interest, Sam the barman.
Yeah.
Who's actually fairly incidental to the plot in some senses, but brings... their relationship is beautiful because it rings true. It's an unusual one. It's not lovey-dovey, but it really is. It's a meeting of minds as well as sexual and physical appreciation, I suppose. And that's quite difficult to write and sustain as genuine. You can be witty without necessarily being appealing.
Yeah.
Particularly when it's slightly barbed or spiky, which theirs is. There's a history between them slightly, but it's a very minor one.
Yeah.
They met once before and things may have happened or not, but there was an attraction. They lost contact, but it was never any more than that. It's once again a very casual thing, and then suddenly they meet in an environment where they're going to see a bit of each other, but they're not going to give in to each other. I'm not describing it at all well, but it's beautifully drawn. Yeah,
I think the concept is that they had met once before, and both of them are not the kind of people who are demonstrative emotionally or are willing to show any form of vulnerability or weakness. And I think that they met, and whatever did happen, which is left unclear deliberately.
Of course,
one thing that did happen is that they did form this kind of meeting of minds connection, and
a link of some variety.
Yeah, and realised that they were sort of on the same wavelength, and that somebody else spoke like them and kind of was on the same pace of life, which I think neither of them necessarily find in people around them a lot. And so when they see each other again, it's less the kind of thing of, oh, you're someone I got with once. It's kind of like, oh, I remember this connection, and I don't want you to know that because, I don't want to seem uncool or keen or whatever, and I've got my life, I'm an independent person, and that's sort of where that begins, which is a nice start to a romantic thing, because it gives you somewhere to go, doesn't it? So,
but it's they've got this sort of beautiful, crisp duologue between the two of them. That's the best way I can describe it, really. It's just sort of, I won't say punchline after punchline, but it's epigram after epigram, or smart comment after smart comment, because what they are both, they're both smart, and they have what used to be called smarts. And they are the smartest people in the room, I suppose. So yes, I love that. That's a beautiful relationship. You've got the younger sister, who is up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about her.
Yep, so that's Annabelle, played by Hannah Kendall, who does a brilliant job of playing a 16-year-old.
She does, absolutely. Mood board,
yeah, absolutely.
Teenage enthusiasms, yes.
Yeah, and Annabelle, I think, is an interesting character because she is both kind of a parody of the genre,
yes,
and is, at the same time, makes a lot of the time the most sense, in terms of she absolutely knows what's going on. She's the first one to clock on to Sam and Lana's relationship and is saying to Alex, you know what, you need to do this and this, and it comes off in a very manic sort of possibly, very over-the-top way, but actually what she's saying makes sense.
Well, in a way, although she wouldn't say it that way, the title is what she's getting them to do.
Yeah. Both of them. And as the younger sibling who nobody really takes seriously, it's quite an interesting perspective to see some of the play from.
Yes, it's a hard position to punch up to, as it were.
Yeah.
No, I think her performance is charming. She was also friendly with the band, isn't she? So she's got she's got friends rather than friendly. It's a friendly relationship, rather than a romantic one. But that's all the better, I think.
Yeah, we didn't want it to turn into Seven Brides, Seven Brothers, really. So there was no need for her to also.
And you, you're in it.
I am.
And you play a wonderful character. Would you care to describe the circle there?
I play Marguerite, who is Pizza Girl.
A delivery girl. That's
delivery girl, yeah. Who comes in very frequently because, as part of Alex's breakdown, he's started ordering a lot of pizza. And they sort of form this bizarre kind of flustered relationship over pizza.
It's utterly charming on both sides, and you play the part to such. It's tenderly comic, if that makes sense. Bumbling is too strong a word, but you're gentle, you're soft, you're funny. You don't push yourself forward, as it were, but there is. But you also get the relationship. It's you do like him.
Yeah.
And it is actually, that's the first thing. I mean, there may be more to it. In fact, there is more to it, but it's not described as such. It's the development of a relationship which is friendship based. Well, am I right in that? I mean, because I think there's, you can see there's an attraction too. Don't get me wrong. But actually, I think your character is a person who wouldn't leap into the big relationship, the big roses and song kind of relationship. It would be sort of gently through friendship kind of thing.
I think that's the other thing with the play as a whole, is that you kind of dip into relationships at very different stages.
Yes.
So you've got Alex and Marguerite at sort of the very, very early stages, where it's basically they just have a crush on each other and don't really know what to do about it. And then Lana and Sam are sort of, they kind of know each other and they're sort of seeing what's happening, and then obviously Alex has just come out of his relationship, so that's the end of one, and you kind of see it from all different perspectives, which is nice.
And there's so much. I tell you why it speaks so much, and I keep using the word British, because it's also understated. I think it relies very strongly on the unsaid as well as what is said.
Yeah.
And that's a marvellous piece of writing, to do that, to get across unsaid things.
Yeah.
I keep going back to the book, because the book is so strong that everything's, it's a wellspring for all the other brilliant ideas, the performances, the songs. Let's talk about the score.
The score. Could you be more specific?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
No, right. If you're forcing it. Well, so Gavin wrote the songs. How did you, as the writers and the director and he, work out where the songs are going, what the tone of the songs was? Was there any mismatch between his interpretation of the book and yours or the director's? Or did you find you're all symbiotically linked, as it were? Because actually you can mismatch and you see it sometimes, but not in this show at all. Yeah,
I think we're very lucky in that we all seem to be on the same wavelength quite quickly. But we...
Like Sam and Lana,
yes. I would send him... This is where I think he's incredibly clever, is I would send him lyrics, and it would just basically be a stream of poetry, which is just from somebody who doesn't play any instruments and is
you're
deeply
a words person first, aren't you?
Definitely a words person, and I'd say this is kind of what's happening here, where early on when we hadn't finished the book, and then once the book was there, he'd read it, so kind of knew. And yeah, he would almost 100% of the time come back with something that had the exact tone. I think any notes that I have would be, can we have this a bit pacier? Because for Cash and Cool, which is Lana and Sam's song, I said when I wrote the lyrics, this needs to be fast paced because their relationship is, and it's kind
of
that
clickety, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that witty, fast paced thing, which is really important, and I wanted that to be in the song. So that was key, and he got that straight away and wrote this sort of brilliantly fast paced song. And I think Sunny Side Up, which is Annabelle's song, kind of the lyrics, it has to be sort of bouncy and up, and so I think hopefully it came across, and also we'd cast it before the songs were written, so a lot of it is written to tailor to the actors' voices.
Well, what a privilege that is for an actor.
Oh yeah, so great. And so Sylvie, who plays Lana, it has this very jazzy song called Breakfast Isn't the Only Meal, which is fits perfectly with her voice, which is lovely to hear. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You could spin that off as a sort of a mood song anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see her doing it as a chanteuse, as I used to say. Because I think the score fits very nicely indeed. And once again, everything I say sounds like damning with faint praise, but it's because of the perfect balance of everything. The score doesn't overwhelm the book. The book doesn't overwhelm the score. The performance is not overwhelmed by anything else. Everything sort of sits in perfect harmony, like the planets.
It's not faint praise at all.
Is it not? Oh,
no,
right.
You've gone astrological with it. It's great.
Thank you. Oh, well, that's very kind of you to say so. But seriously, it is that balance that makes everything work so nicely. So the score fits perfectly into the kaleidoscope, I suppose. And the songs are beautifully sung, and they fit the characters. And that's another skill. It's not, sometimes a composer's personality can, or a lyricist's personality can almost overwhelm a piece, or not become one note, but they're like an extra person on the stage because you can sense them through the book. I don't want to say that you as lyricist and Gavin as composer are lost in it, but you have tailored it to the right
I think we
level.
should be, really.
Yes.
I would hope that we are.
What that does, it shows versatility.
Yeah,
yes.
And I think all the songs are actually sort of assigned very specifically to characters. There's very few chorus numbers, which means that they do reflect the characters well, which is the whole point. So that's great.
And it's got a very, once again, I'm using the word, a very British sensibility, not just in the book, but in the score. And your actors sing in English accents, because I've seen several shows up here in Edinburgh where a perfectly British piece has been slightly marred by everyone going all transatlantic when they sing the songs. And you
That's
think,
bizarre.
Why are you crossing the Atlantic?
Yeah.
I'll just go out halfway on this cruise liner and sing you a song. That can jar, but not in this at all. Once again, there's a set tone. So your director has brought a great deal as well to that, although I'm sure it's all in the performances too. I know I'm just praising, but I think it's a beautiful piece. I think the question I've got to ask, it's slightly tangential then, is, as I've said, Bristol has produced so many great shows in the last few years.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of the history of Bristol doing this, or is it just luck that all the right people are coming out, such as yourself, through that particular system? What's Bristol got that others haven't?
Well, I remember when I was applying for universities, Bristol was top of my list because I'd heard so much about its drama scene, and its extracurricular drama scene, and it's a large reason why I went there. So it's got that reputation, so I think it attracts people that are keen beans to use the band name. People who are very into theatre and music do tend to all go there, because of the reputation that it has, and it means that you're with very creative, like-minded people a lot of the time, who are as enthusiastic as you are about the subject, and I think that's why you get a lot of great talent out. But it's been a privilege to be at the uni at the time that I was, because I just clashed with so many amazingly talented people. So that was
Clashed
really
in the sense of we're there at the same time.
It was there at the same time rather than didn't get
punched their
on.
lights out. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No. I was there at the same time as some very, very talented people, and that's a
And
privilege.
they you, of course, another talented person.
Thank
See
you.
what I did there?
Yes.
Anyway, well, I think it must be that then. So it has, every time I see Bristol as a show, Bristol attached to anything, it always seems to bring something which I like. And the musical scene in the last 10 years has, certainly in Fringe, I think been not dominated, it's impossible to say that, but the gems that have come from Bristol are usually excellent, and this is absolutely no different. It's part of a long tradition of really marvellous shows that have come out of Bristol. I hope that continues for a long time. What next for A, you, and B, this show then?
Well, for the show, it's sort of up in the air. We're kind of, we'd love to do a transfer or have it on again, so if the right person comes to see it, then that'll definitely happen. So that, big question mark. And for me, another big question mark, having just graduated, I am looking to pursue writing and acting.
So you want to stay in the dramatic field?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really pleased.
Oh, thank you. So that'll be, it's such a difficult field to go into, so I'll be pursuing that in as many ways as I can and finding the time to write and audition and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
And how has the piece been received? Because the night I was there, it was very well received.
Yeah, it's been really lovely, actually. We've had 3 4-star reviews so far, which is brilliant, from Ed, Fringe and Broadway Baby. We've got a few more reviewers coming in soon, which is great. We've got one in tonight. And we've had very, very full audiences, which is great for the time slot. It's on at 11:35, which...
It's a late show, isn't it?
It's a very late show, which I kind of think is great for what it is, because it is very light-hearted and very fun, and I think...
it's a nice last moment of the day, as it were.
Yeah,
you can finish your day well by seeing.
I think we advertise it as you will either finish your day on the high or start your night out on one.
I like that.
Yeah,
depending on age, of course. Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm now of an age where it finished my night.
Yep. So that's a great selling point, but also was a bit of a worry of, are there going to be people there? Is everybody going to be go away, leave me to my pint? I don't know what students singing right now. But no, absolutely, we've had full audiences, and we had some standing ovations, which has been great. And yeah.
Because the other thing about it is it's actually in a venue which I very rarely go to, because it doesn't often do musical theatre. Underbelly doesn't have that reputation. It's not to say that it hasn't, and I have seen a few things there over the years, but it's certainly never been one of the venues I go to a lot. And it has a lot of lovely venues, and they're in these, as you say, these sort of caverns and caves, which give a great deal of atmosphere to a lot of shows. Yeah. You could do Dracula marvellously in there, I think, or Frankenstein.
Probably.
But so in a way, it would be almost possible to miss you, and I would hope people wouldn't, because it's a show absolutely worth seeing. Do you have a website? We
don't know, but we do have a Facebook page. So if you search Deadpan Theatre on Facebook, we're there, and our Twitter is @Deadpan_theatre, and a lot of our news comes out of there. So they're probably the best ways to follow us.
And there is genuine interest in you, by the way, because I noticed the night I came, people were stopping you on the stairs, I think, to ask you if there were recordings and things like that.
Oh, yeah, there were some girls that asked, which if we got more requests for, I'd be very up for doing.
Can I have some recordings, please? Honestly, it's lovely.
Well, I will. I'll definitely see if we can organise that. But as I say, Facebook and Twitter are the way to find out if that does happen.
So people can stay on board and see what's happening.
Yeah, keep up to date.
Yeah, and see where it's going in the future.
Yeah.
Well, we sort of got to. Well, we've just mentioned the score actually again. So let's talk about the people who perform it. Ernest and the Keen Beans.
Yeah.
Now, they are almost, as we said, Greek chorus a few minutes ago. There's a lovely... It is nice, but they are included in the drama as a real thing.
Yeah.
Because they also have the function of the band. But also you have Ernest, who's their sort of lead player, who's... I don't know how to describe him, really. He's... we said earlier that they are, as a group, in their own little bubble.
Yeah.
I think he's convinced of his own brilliance.
He is.
As a character. And your Ernest is he's very talented, but he's a lovely camp character.
Oh yeah, no, Ernest is sort of brilliantly arrogant and very flamboyant, and a great character to have sort of underlying all of the scenes, because he stands out so brilliantly, despite the fact that he doesn't have a lot to say, or I mean, they have a lot to do because of the music, but they probably have the least actual lines. But because they're and the girls actually, the characters are so clear, I think, and clearly delivered by them, that it doesn't matter that they're not talking all the time, because they're very charismatic as people, I think, and their characters come off very, very well.
Well, what's lovely, they give a lovely sort of contrast, a bit of edge, in the sense that you've got essentially a cast of understated characters, which, and by understating, you get more. Yeah. But these three are not.
No.
You know, the two women in the band have got this kind of sort of, nailed it babes.
Yeah.
Kind of, they're also equally convinced of their excellence, even if there's a slight tension within the band, I might say.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, Ernest has got his own particular look at me, everybody kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And but because they're not, because they are slightly rationed in the piece, that works really well. They don't overwhelm it. They don't. Once again, it's all about balance. Everything in, it's. It's like an 18th century clock that was built for George III. Everything is in its place and it looks beautiful, it has elegance, and it's still working 200, 300 years later.
Yeah.
In this, I saw it a few days ago, and I'm still finding new layers and levels, and I'm just genuinely impressed. It's
Thank
just
you
a
so
great
much.
piece. Well, Elliot, thank you very much for talking to me and for
thank you.
Musical Talk. I can only say that it's an absolutely 5-star show. I enjoyed it down to the ground and up to the skies. And I do hope that it has a life, and I hope that you go on to also present us with more of these little gems, if I may say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's lovely to meet you.
Musical Talk. And there we have it. The Musical Talk Pick of the Fringe 2015. Get your shit together. My thanks to Elliot Salt for talking to me about that wonderful show. It was fantastic in Edinburgh, and I strongly hoped that it was going to go somewhere else. Well, it did. It came to the Landor Theatre here in London in September. Sadly, I didn't hear about that until it had finished its run, and I can't find any more evidence that it's going anywhere else. But I hope that it will. It certainly deserves to. It's an utterly modern, contemporary British musical, which really couldn't have been done anywhere else, I think, and speaks to me, and it spoke to many, many others. If you ever get the chance, go and see this wonderful piece. And that, dear listener, is pretty much the end of Edinburgh for 2015 in terms of coverage here on Musical Talk. It's not, of course, the end of Musical Talk. There'll be more episodes again in the future, so do stay tuned for all that's bright and breezy and wonderful in the world of musical theatre. But we'll leave you tonight with a song from a totally different show. It's been written and performed by an old friend of this programme, Sue Casson. And you may remember last year in her Edinburgh show, The English Cabaret Hour, she wrote a fantastic song about Jeremy Paxman. Well, this year's edition of The English Cabaret Hour also featured another brand new song about someone from British culture. It's a lovely song, and what better way of finishing our coverage of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe for 2015. It was a golden year, and I enjoyed it very much. So, until the next time, speak to you soon. Goodbye.
I miss you, Alan Titchmarsh, with your cheeky gap-toothed grin and air of affability that masks the wasp within. For a simple toiler of the soil, you brushed up pretty smart and captured every female gardener's heart. Blazer sharp, fingers green, you brightened every gardening scene, almost a border on your own. Shirts fairy pinks, fairy blues, a myriad of rosy hues, but always perfect in their tone. I miss you, Alan Titchmarsh, no common name for you. A land palustrous minor of variegated hue. You were a hardy annual, perennially a pro. Though once our afternoon delight, now we snuggle up in bed at night. Unkindly cut, it wasn't right. Why did they let you go? You were Chelsea gold, undisputed best in show. early flowers, fruit and veg, all presented with a pleasing edge, cutting views and how and when to sow. Cause a spade, always decoratively displayed. You're wasted on the radio. Be-be-be-do, I miss you, Alan Titchmarsh, a northern cultivar. You climbed from being no but a lad to the everyman you are. I miss your jokey blokiness, and how's your garden grow? You truly were a bloom so rare, with that surprising boyish hair. You stalked the green with theatrical flair. Why did they let you go? You were Chelsea gold, undisputed best. You were Chelsea gold, never silver gilt. You were Chelsea gold, undisputed best in show.
This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015, except for the song, where the copyright remains with the original creators. And my thanks to Sue Casson for allowing me to play it.